Richard, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you.
I think you and I have talked about this subject a lot, but just for the benefit of the video, a little bit of what we're doing is we're just talking about the business side of being a guitar player.
Yeah.
And that being said, let's just jump right in. You came to Nashville years ago when I think the scene was maybe a little bit different. But what was it that you first did when you got here to try to establish yourself as a guitar player?
I had already played here in 1991, 92 and 93. Missed 95 and 96. This was at the Chet Atkins convention.
Right.
So really that was my first introduction to anybody in the United States. As far as being a guitar player, was playing for those folks there. And then I played 97, 98, 99, 2000. Well, every year. Came back, but I missed a couple of years. But so I already knew people, had met a lot of people. I had been out to Los Angeles, played at the NAMM show, done a couple of gigs, knew a few people, but everything was kind of as a result of playing at the Chet Atkins convention. And of course, I met my wife, who lived in Chicago at the time. And always figured that Nashville would be a good place for me to be. So many players around here. What I thought I was going to do when I got here was kind of up in the air. One thing I knew I could do was play as a solo player because I had enough material that I knew I could do a couple of hours or whatever, however much I could do. Just play a whole solo set without a band. And for me, that's been very important to do that because it opens up it opens up the amount of gigs you can do.
Sure.
And so that has been helpful, and that's pretty much what I did as soon as I got here because I couldn't afford to wait around for people to call me.
Okay.
And so I just started calling other people to start with, because a lot of people, they may move here with the intention of getting a gig with a band, getting hired. Whereas when you're a soloist and you are the act, you get hired by the promoter rather than getting hired by the band leader. So two different things, really. So that's a start there. What did I do first off?
Right.
I just started calling everybody I already knew and let them know I was in town. Asking advice. What should I be doing? Who should I be meeting? Blah blah blah. I mean, that's what you do. You just go out and play, and I think you have to make your own decisions as you go on as to exactly what it is you want to do. Do you want to try and focus on studio work? There's not as much of that around as there used to be. Do you want to focus on live gigs in town? Do you want to get a road band in a road band with somebody who's touring out of town? So you have to make decisions exactly what you want to do and how you want to make a living.
Right. So when you moved here, it sounds like you didn't have a backup day job. You moved here and you started gigging right away?
Having a backup day job is sometimes really good, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes you end up relying on that. And you end up not really, it's 8 hours of your day gone already.
Right.
So I had some help from people, but it forced me to hit the ground running, so to speak. I knew some people, played as many gigs as I could. Actually, thinking about it, I've no idea how I managed. But you do, you just do,
Clearly,
Yeah. I remember one time, we had, we had maybe like $50-$60 left in our bank account or something like that. We were down to the wire. Well, we stayed with Muriel Anderson for a while. Stayed with Mike Volz, couple of months.
Okay.
With Muriel, couple of months with Mike Volz at Gibson. Very good of those guys to put us up because they knew what we were. I think people do that. They kind of see what position you're in. Sure. They know that you're trying to get a start, and they just say, "Yeah, this, come stay here or whatever." So I've done that myself because we're in the same boat, so to speak. So I remember we were down to our last $60, and I went and got I needed an electric razor because things were getting out of control here.
Right.
And I was growing my goatee, and it's like, oh, I haven't got a razor. It's gone. It broken. So I got the razor, and I had to go, and I put it on the wrong setting and just shaved my whole beard off. I was like, damn, I already had a real razor. I could have saved myself $20 and just had a shave. It was those kind of decisions.
Right.
Like, but I think that stuff is it's character building.
That's what they say.
Yeah,
right.
That's what they say.
What they say.
What fun! What fun! But no, so that you manage, and
right.
If you can find somebody to stay with, then that's always good. That's
sure.
$1,000 a month right there.
Right.
You don't have to pay straight, right. Which is it's all very helpful. So.
Right. So let's fast forward a little bit to what you're doing now. Clearly, what you did when you first moved here was successful because of where you are now. So where you are now is you're gigging how many shows a year would you say? Over 100.
It's difficult to say. Yeah, probably 150. All I know is I'm on the road about 70% of the time.
Right.
I'm not gigging during that whole 70% because I do like to take some days off where I am. If I'm in Sedona, I've got a gig in Sedona that I do. I'll do my Sedona gig. I want to spend a few days in Sedona and look around some of these amazing places, which is part of the reason I love being on the road is, and particularly I have to say, I love it all over, but particularly out west because there were no moonscapes and Marsscapes in England. You look at those orange rocks, and I always say that when I'm on the road. I love being out west because there was nothing remotely like it in where I was. So it's always fun to do that.
Sure. So when you're booking, first of all, I guess, how far out are you booked when you say 150 gigs a year, roughly? It
depends on the venue, the promoter. I mean, I'm doing all kinds of stuff. I'm doing small theaters, music shops, festivals, house concerts are a big thing these days. And one thing leads. I don't have an agent. Well, I'm just about to sign with somebody up in Minnesota, but really? I've done it all just through word of mouth and one gig leading to another. You do a gig. Okay. You ask around who else is, you say, who else do you know? Or somebody will give you a card and say, hey, I've got this venue. Would you be interested in coming to play for us here? There's always a music promoter, especially with the kind of music that I'm playing. It's not what you might call, the kind of music that we play is not mainstream public music. So so the people that show up are into that kind of music. And they've got connections to music because they
deeply.
Yeah, that's generally what happens. They're into it, and they know other people. Whereas pop bands, people go and see a pop band for an entirely different reason. So it's a different kind of thing. So this is kind of this is arts music.
So let me ask you something about what you just said because it's actually further down on my list. But since you mentioned it. This is actually the first time that I've heard you talk about signing with any sort of management. My question before was going to be, have you ever worked with a booking agent or a manager of any kind? And I thought I knew the answer to that, but clearly not. So let's talk about that and how that's going to work, and if you've ever done something like that before.
I did sign. There's a company called Live on Stage, and before that it was actually Treywick Artists. They are community concerts agency, and they've got a lot of acts that they showcase to community concerts all over the country. Some of these community concerts, I think they used to be Columbia artists. I think maybe Columbia Records used to have. I'm sure they put their artists in a lot of these venues.
Sure.
But these could be high school auditoriums, they could be local theatres, but the Community Concerts Association, some of them have been going for 80 years, 90 years or more. And they got a big mailing list of people that buy a subscription ticket, for example.
Okay.
They'll pay X amount of dollars for 5 concerts for the season or 12 concerts or whatever. Mm-hmm. So you go and play in those towns if those associations have hired you because they would have seen you doing the showcase, so you'll get hired to play in those towns. And some, I remember playing in, I think it was Sacramento. 1,700 people showed up. Now then, remember they're not showing up to see me specifically because they know who I am and they're my fans.
Sure.
They are showing up to see whoever happens to be playing because they've signed up for the subscription series and they trust the agency, they trust the Community Concert Association to hire acts that they think they're going to enjoy. So,
Okay.
So that was good. But the thing is, you can't do that every year because they rotate the artists.
Okay.
I'll try and get back on that at some point. That's good. But at the same time, you know, that's good, but it's not guaranteed. You've still got to try and build your own following and your own fan base so that when you go and play somewhere, you decide when you're playing that place, and then people that know you will show up. That's the way I look at it.
So you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you use booking agencies and booking managers more to supplement the shows that you're already playing as opposed to handling your entire roster.
Well, this was, I've only done that for 2 or 3 years. That was many years ago now, and I've been booking myself exclusively. But I have had some help from the odd person who's booked me a couple of gigs. There's a friend of mine in North Carolina who's booked me a couple of things. A lady up in Minnesota has decided now that she is going to go full time and be a full time booking agent. She has a partner, and actually need to get back in touch with her over the next couple of days and decide which route I want to go with her. But it's probably just going to be local. Just Minnesota at that point, but I think she may go national. But she had booked me some gigs in the past, and that was just somebody I knew through somebody else I knew that said she'll be able to book you some gigs. And it's just knowing people, it's building relationships and getting, of course, you know, going to the gig and just giving it your best and delivering because if you don't do that, then you know it's not going to happen. But you know, you set standards for yourself, and you hope that you can deliver every time, and that's the thing. But yeah, other than that, I've been booking myself and just one gig leading to another.
Okay. What about the international work that you've been doing? Specifically, I think you've been doing more in China, not in Japan. Right?
I did, yeah. I've done that was really just, I think, you know, YouTube helps an awful lot. I mean, my friend Nishi over there, he's booked me a couple of times, and he maybe he came to the Chet Atkins Festival. I can't remember where he first heard of me, but maybe it was on YouTube. And that, you know, YouTube is international, so it's always good to be on there getting views. The great thing about it is it's just instantly shareable. It's not like the old days when you had to send photographs, hard copy press pack and CDs and send it out, and it'll end up on someone's desk for 5 minutes before it's thrown in the bin.
Right.
Because you don't.
And it was a massive expense for you when you did it. Right.
And you've got to post it. But these days it's a question of several YouTube clips, a website, and really everything anyone needs to know about you should be online.
Sure.
Photographs and your website where you're playing. That's always good. If you're booked and you're playing and you are gigging a lot and somebody knows that, you're more of a viable candidate for a gig, I think. Whereas, you know, if you're not working, you're looking for your first gig. You're always a risk to someone. You're an unknown quantity.
Sure.
And still, the higher up the ladder you go, you're an unknown quantity to some of those folks. But you're
right.
You just try and forge ahead. But most important thing is never get despondent with it, because this is, none of us got into this. None of us got into this because we thought we would be successful and make a ton of money. We got into it because this is what we want to do with our time. Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, you can get a job and pay for your house with something that you're not necessarily passionate about, or you can do this and then you're always having fun. Well, hopefully that's the theory anyway.
Right.
That's
if you're not enjoying it.
And plus, I don't do anything else. This is what I've always done.
Yeah.
But it's always been fun. It's always takes me to different places. You meet all kinds of people. It's been great for me as far as that goes. But just booking and one gig leading to another. follow up on those. Follow up on every lead. That's what I would say to anybody: is follow up and follow up. And everyone's path is different. This is just the way I've done it.
Yeah.
But just and play where you can be seen by people. Playing in festivals, playing at the Chet Atkins convention obviously was really good for me because there was a lot of people there, and they all see you and they get to know you because you're on a stage where everyone is who's a fan of that. So that's very genre specific,
Right.
and a lot of people that are into that are watching you do exactly what they're into. So
Sure.
that's handy.
Sure. So it sounds a little bit like you are talking about exposure gigs, which is somewhat of a taboo
Exposure
phrase.
credits.
Right.
No, I know. I don't think there's any way around that to start with.
Okay.
But you can't do it for too long.
Right.
And I guess everyone will ask you about that. Yeah, the exposure gigs. That's the big joke, isn't it? You can die from exposure. But
Right.
I think if you're dealing with the right people, I can honestly say that I've rarely, if ever, I don't think I've ever been screwed on a gig because I've always worked for people that I've always figured wanted me to do well. They enjoyed what I do and they want to see me do well, and those are the people I've worked for. So I really haven't had that experience. Maybe once or twice that it didn't work out, but it all comes out in the wash. You can't, you can't fret about it. But I think they want you to do well, and the people that just want you to work for exposure, they don't. No, I mean not all the time, unless it's the right thing. If you're gonna, if you're gonna work for exposure when you know what the deal is, if you know what the deal is, is who else. It's no one really wants to talk about this stuff, but if everyone else is getting paid except you, then what's wrong with me? What is that?
What's
what
the
am I?
issue?
What am I, chopped liver?
Right.
So, but if you know everyone else is doing it, then you go along with it. So it's really you just kind of weigh up the pros and cons.
Sure.
You figure what kind of an audience. I mean, you ask if somebody says it's exposure, then you ask them, what kind of an audience have you got? I mean, if somebody asked me, would you like to do this gig for exposure? If it's on Jimmy Fallon, then the answer is yes.
Right.
Of course. If the answer is it's at my restaurant, I'm thinking, well, if it's a restaurant, if you've got a whole bunch of people who have concert series associated, if it's people who would hire me to do something, whereas if it's just people showing up to eat who aren't music fans, I'm not going to do it.
Sure.
Because it serves me no purpose at all. I'd be better off on the phone. Or practicing rather than who are you being exposed to and how many people.
Right.
That's really what it is.
So the key question is to whom am I exposing myself to?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
All right.
It's a question I ask myself a lot. Yeah.
So kind of shifting gears a little bit, we've been talking about a lot of the do's, a lot of do this, do that, don't give up. What are the don'ts? What are the things that maybe you've made a mistake on, you've seen other people make mistakes on, and it's either set them back or it's done them no good?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Everyone does it their own way. Let me think. What not to do? I mean, try not to be late. Don't be late. Don't be same as you would for any. Don't be rude. Try not to. I think when you're just like you would be in any other business or just socially, you can't be too familiar with people right off the bat because you don't know these folks, and everyone has their boundaries and whatnot. So I mean, I think don't pester people. I may have, again, it depends on your opinion. I may have maybe knocked on a door too often to try to get a gig or whatever in the past. But I don't think so. I generally, I don't do it too often. But I think you can chase a gig, but then you can become a pest. You don't want to do that.
Right.
So you got, just, leave it a few months.
Sure.
Leave it 6 months. Leave it a year. Even that is too much for some people. My dad, I remember him getting in touch with a guy, with an agent actually, who was going to book us. This was back in the mid-90s.
Yeah.
Got in touch with an agent who was going to book us. And the guy said, sure, yeah, we'll get something happening. And he called him because my dad kept a really good calendar, a good diary, knew who he called and when. And the guy didn't come in with any gigs at all. My dad called him a year later and said, oh, just check and see if you're going to book the guys anything, see what's happening. The guy said, well, if you pester me, I won't book them anything. This was a year later. Right. So everyone has a different
different standard of what pester means.
It just made me laugh. Right. But yeah, just call them every so often. Yeah. And but generally that is going to that will happen less and less. The more people that know you, the more successful that you get. And really, it's about being known as well, because you're a known quantity. Mm-hmm. The more people that know you, you won't have to chase. You'll just make a call. And this happens to me much more often these days. Is somebody will recommend that I call someone, or a gig will lead to another gig, and I call someone, and then they know who I am because they've seen me or they've seen me on YouTube. Sure. And that's what you want, because then you don't have to, you don't have to tell everyone how good you are. Right. Which is the horrible thing about having to sell yourself. Sure. Having an agent say, hey, this guy's fantastic. You want to hear him. It doesn't sound bad. It sounds terrible when it's coming from yourself, which is why I don't do that. It's like, well, here's my website. Here's some YouTube clips. Here's where I'm playing. Here's where I played before. Mm-hmm. I'd be interested in playing for you. And I've not said anything about the quality of what I do. Mm-hmm. I've just said, here is what I do. Would you be interested? And that's it. And that way, I remember a guy calling me one time, said, have you heard me play? I said, no, I haven't. He said, oh man, you should hear me. I'm smoking. And I just thought,
even if he was,
even he could be the greatest player in the world, but it doesn't sound good. A magician can sell a trick. They can tell you it's the most amazing thing you've ever seen, and then they do something you don't know how they did it, and they can get away with that. Right. And that gets me. Yeah. What you're about to see is incredible. You see the magician selling the trick, but then they're selling the trick. They're not selling themselves.
Right. I feel like with a musician, when they do that, they're setting themselves up for the.
Right.
Oh really?
Oh really?
Oh really?
That's it. Right. But why?
Let's see it.
Why not magicians?
Right.
Because you don't know how they did the trick, and therefore you are amazed, and they can say it.
So
P.T. Barnum.
There you go.
Yeah.
Should have gone into magic instead of guitar. That's it. Right. Lesson number 2. Number 1 is who you're exposing yourself to. Lesson 2, it should have been a magician.
Should have been a magician.
Should have been a magician. All right, so let's kind of shift gears a little bit into guitar habits. What might make somebody, again, kind of keeping it in the professional sense, what habits are good versus what habits maybe need to be let go.
You mean as far as technique and playing habits, or practice habits, or
practice habits and other, if you've got other, yeah.
I always, my gigs are a good standard for what songs I might need a rust spot. What songs haven't I played in a while? Mm-hmm. What arrangements might I not have gone through in a while? And this is very much for solo players, as opposed to, if you're improvising with a band, you need to remember the song and remember the structure, because when you're improvising, you're playing what you know to do in that moment. I mean, obviously you have to run your scales, run your licks, and just play over changes, play over different songs, get used to doing that. That's when you're practicing improvising, is literally you're practicing improvising. I would, one little exercise I've been doing just lately, just to strengthen my little finger, just really slow scale with a metronome. Whoops. See, my fingers are weak now.
Right.
See what I'm doing? I'm actually...
Right.
I'm letting that ring. Just go up and down the scale really slowly. It just builds a little strength and evenness that will get better with time. And you play it on the metronome. Right hand, or whatever scale you want to play.
Yeah.
That's just something I've been doing. Just really slow and keeping it with the metronome and keeping it in the pocket. I'll do that for hours now. You asked the wrong question. You got it. You got it. And getting that.
Yeah.
Making it sustain.
Right.
Because me playing it, tapping my foot is not the same as playing with the metronome.
Sure. Right.
Because this is still me.
Right.
And I've got to play to it.
Closer than what I'd get to a metronome. But so I guess on this, in another video, I was talking with Brent Mason and I asked him this question. And it's something that I'm always curious about in terms of people's practice habits. You know, personally, I'm someone who, when I roll out of bed, even before I go shower, I get a cup of coffee, I sit down with the guitar, and I just sit and drink my coffee and play guitar. That's kind of my morning routine, my morning habit. Yeah. Do you have something like that for yourself?
No, I don't. What is my morning habits?
The ones that you want to talk about on camera.
I want to talk about. Yeah, you don't really want to. You know, I do play guitar every day. Yeah. And I don't have any practice routine so much. Sometimes I'll get into a routine and I'll just go through some scales. I'll play a tune. I'll usually get a tune stuck in my head that I'm just playing the earworm or something new or some new lick or something. Then I may go through some scales. I'll do that often before a gig. I'll do that exercise.
I've seen you do that before gigs.
It's just a good warm up routine, very slow and very deliberate. Slow and deliberate, I think, is good warm up routine. It just helps your time, helps your control, and your strength in these fingers. But also, I'll try and play gigs. I mean, there's a little hotel gig that I've done a few times when I've been in town here. I don't look at it as a touring gig. I look at it as a workout gig. You know,
sure.
You just play. It's not even a wallpaper gig. Well, it kind of is a wallpaper gig, but it's just on background music. But it's not like you can sit there and practice. You actually have to play.
Right.
But it's still it's good practice for me because I run tunes that I haven't played for a while, and see where the rust spots might start to appear.
Sure.
And that's the thing. And usually the rust spots, you know when a rust spot appears because your mind goes a little blank, and then you start to speed up because you want to get it over with.
Yeah.
And that's the times the worry. But you want to keep your time solid. So playing with a metronome is good. Yeah. Running over repertoire is good. Running over all the repertoire that you know, trying to keep as many songs committed to memory, and sometimes even songs that you might have a fixed arrangement, but you just want to improvise and play with it a little bit. It's nice to have both. If you're not feeling, it just depends on the way you feel. You can take a solo. You might have a note for note solo worked up, or you might just want to improvise a little bit. That's a constant discussion that I have with people.
It's a discussion you and I have had before.
Yeah. To improvise, which is fun.
Yeah. And
exciting, and it's new for you, or to work out a solo that you know is going to work.
Right.
Yeah. Both valid.
Let me ask you this, getting kind of back to the business side a little bit more.
Yeah.
You've chosen a path, or you've gone down a path in your music career that is very geared towards solo performances, and you explained earlier why, and it's worked extremely well for you.
It's kept me working.
Right. So, was there a conscious decision to say, I'm going to do this, as opposed to going and playing for somebody else?
Right.
And, for instance, John Jorgensen's made a phenomenal career. Yeah. A large part of it was playing for, people like Elton John. Yeah. So, obviously that worked out for him. What was the
decision making.
Right. Yeah.
It's funny. I remember talking to John about that, and obviously it's a great gig playing for Elton John. But I remember him saying at some point, "Okay, when am I going to do me? When am I going to do my thing?" And I think he may have been able to stay on and carry on doing that, but he had to do his own thing, which is great. And I think John's own. Well, he's obviously got his bluegrass band, his rock band, his gypsy jazz band. Is
He
the
stays
first
busy.
time that he did. Oh yeah, it's great. Yeah. He's a rock star, a bluegrass guy, and a gypsy jazz guy, and he loves all kinds of music, which is great. And me, when I moved to town, I think that was the impetus. I wasn't even sure. I think I'd said earlier, I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do, whether I was going to be a sideman. I thought maybe I'll do some recordings, maybe get in someone's band, do some solo gigs. But straight away I figured, I haven't got time to mess around. I'm just going to book myself some gigs because I could. And I just stuck with it because it seemed like the smartest idea. And I do love playing. I mean, I've got my duet that I have with Julie that we haven't done in a good while now. We want to get more on the road next year. I do some duet gigs once in a while with Brent, who I know you interviewed earlier. And that's great fun. I've been a huge Brent Mason fan for a long, long time. So it's great fun to do that. So we do some of his stuff. We'll do some standards and a couple of Jerry Reed tunes. And it makes for a fun show. Yeah,
my band, we opened for you guys doing that gig a few months ago down in Atlanta.
Indeed. Yeah, we did.
A lot of fun.
Then I've got the Transatlantic Trio, which is a newer thing. Well, actually, the thing I've done with Brent is we've only done it a couple of times over the last couple of years. But the Transatlantic Trio, myself and Rory Hoffman, amazing multi-instrumentalist, but with this he sticks mostly to his guitar.
Okay.
I think playing the guitar is really the reason he moved to Nashville. He wanted to be mostly a guitar player, but he plays keyboard and saxophone. Everything is just amazing.
Everything.
And of course the phenomenal Yosho Stefan. So myself, Rory, and Yosho. I'd worked with Rory in various capacities, and I'd done some gigs with Yosho, and I know they had jammed together at the Chet Atkins convention a couple of years ago. I wasn't there to see that, but I know they would have had a blast. So I knew they knew each other, and Yosho called me to do a few gigs because I'd done some work with him in Germany. He said, "How about we do something together?" I said, "Sure." He said, "Should we get a bass player as well?" I said, "Well, we could do that if we're going to have a trio. Why don't we call Rory? Because we could forego the bass for an extra guitar." And as it happened, Rory, in that trio, he uses a low A string. So he's kind of our bass player and rhythm player.
Yeah.
As well as taking phenomenal solos. But it's it turned into something a lot of fun. So yeah, the Transatlantic Trio. So we did the record. But that'll be something that won't, it'll be a side project for all of us, and a lot of fun. I just love doing that. Love playing with Brent, love playing with Julie, and of course the Hot Club of Nashville, which has been a thing.
Right.
And Annie Selick with the Hot Club of Nashville. It's great fun to have various things going on, and it forces you to think in different ways. It's just good. Sure. It's good for the soul, playing in bands, and it's great fun. I look forward to all of those projects. But still, as far as the solo gig goes, I'm still looking to do the perfect gig that I'm like, I nailed every single note, the whole thing,
With all of those things, would you say that in terms of your bread and butter, what is earning you a living? All of them equally, solo gigs more so?
Oh no, the solo gigs by far. Yeah, I mean, I don't do a lot of the other things. Mostly the solo gigs.
Right.
The other thing about playing solo is, you can take. There are more gigs that you can take where it's not going to be economically viable for three guys to do this gig.
Right.
So you can do that. Whereas when you got, if you got a full band on the road, some of these bluegrass bands and gypsy jazz bands that might be on the road, you got a full band. That's five guys you have to pay. The pot is split between five guys, and hotel rooms, and it's just expensive. You got 5 mouths to feed, a bigger vehicle to rent, all the gear, maybe a sound man. Usually with that kind of thing, if you got a full-time band who is making a living playing in a full-time situation, playing festivals and playing gigs, they've usually got a whole other team happening as well, a promotional team. I mean, you basically have to be, just to make a living as a 5-piece band, you basically have to be a household name. I think. I mean, back in the old days, from what I hear, because I wasn't around in those days, back in the 80s, 90s, you used to be able to be a jobbing, clubbing musician and make a decent living. And there are guys that do it in town here.
Right. Yeah.
They're working sometimes 2 shifts a day, sometimes 3 shifts a day.
Yeah.
And working, 4, 5, 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week doing that. And it's doable.
Yeah.
But not as a touring musician.
Right. Right.
And again, that's the difference between, some people want to be home. They want to go home at night. And I totally understand that.
Yeah.
And I do like that as well. But I like to, I've got friends everywhere. I miss everywhere, but I live everywhere. That's why, this place is this is my storage locker and my dog kennel.
Right. Well, actually, so let's talk about where we are right now. We're in Toonsmith Studios. What is this?
This is a recording studio. This is actually this is the old garage.
Yeah.
2-car garage and a workshop, so to speak, and it was just an open shell. Had pegboard on the walls. It had cupboards with spiders in them and all that kind of stuff, and a bench with loads of drill holes, and we just tore it all out. My brother-in-law did a fabulous job. I basically took a piece of regular print A4 paper and drew lines. And what's the best way? We'll have the toilet here. We'll have the booth there. So, this is the main room we're in, such as it is. I don't know, 14 by 16. The walls are not even. Got a piano booth, an auxiliary booth, a vocal booth, and the control room in there. And I really built this to do my own projects and do other people's projects. And again, this is another income stream.
Right.
And the reason I built this was a kind of partial plan A and plan B. I mean, by far, I make most of my living on the road, playing gigs, solo gigs, as I said. But I didn't want to be on the road all the time. Otherwise, I might as well not have a house.
Right.
I might as well not have any dogs at all, and not be married. Well, Julie's sometimes with me, but this is something to do when I get home. If I look at my schedule, I think, well, I'll have been on the road for a month, or I'll have been on the road for 3 weeks. Let me take a week off there, or let me take 10 days at home. I'll usually fill that with maybe a gig in town, or just some studio work here.
Yeah.
And so it keeps me here, and it keeps me sane. It gives it gives me a reason to be doing the gigs, to come home. But I don't just want to come home and put my feet up and just eat up everything I just made.
Right.
I want to stay working because I enjoy it as well. It's great fun. Plus, this gives me the ability to work with other people who are in town, which is kind of the reason I moved here.
Yeah.
To work with great musicians. I've had some of my all-time favorite players, guys whose CDs I was listening to, or sidemen on various CDs who I was listening to when I was over in England, thinking Nashville is a fun place. That guy's there. This guy's there.
Right.
And so now a lot of those guys are in here recording as sidemen, and other new guys who are fantastic players as well.
Sure.
So it's a great town for that. Everyone's 20 minutes away.
Literally, almost.
Really, yeah. Pretty much.
So the last thing that I want to kind of talk about is a little bit of a taboo topic.
Let's go there. Let's go straight for the throat.
Right. Avoiding specific numbers, because that's not what I'm asking you. But how would a musician go about determining their value in terms of the venue wants to know what you're gonna make. The promoter wants to know what you're gonna ask for.
Right.
How do you come up with this number?
Right. It's a friend of mine who is very well known in the business. I asked him the same question. He said his line is, "What can you give me without hurting yourself?" And I have used that many times, and it's good. And it's because you can make what you can draw.
Right.
What if you're playing in a restaurant, if you're playing in a bar, and the owner wants you to go and play there, what are you going to make if you're solo? What's the number? What's the number? The number is $100, right? So that doesn't make you.
Been $100
It's been
since the
$100
70s.
since the 70s. That's
Right.
why I don't do those gigs. Those
Right.
gigs will never go anywhere. You'll never get a raise because no one is going there to see you. They're going to eat, and that guy just wants you in there as background music. So there's nowhere to go unless someone's in there. So I avoid those generally like the plague. But those are the gigs that you sometimes have to take if you want to stay in town.
Right.
If you're on the road, how many people can you draw? If they're promoting you to a certain crowd, you've got your ticket price. What is your ticket price? What's the local market? What will that bear? And what is your percentage of the gate? It might be all of it. Certain concerts will give you all of it because they're not in it to make money. They just enjoy having the concerts. Some venues, if it's a venue that isn't a house concert, they've got to make money. 70-30 deal is a very standard deal. The least you should ever work for is 50-50. You might get an 80-20. You might get more than that, but it just depends on how good, the art of the deal.
Right.
Depends on how good a negotiator you are. Figure out your ticket price. 100 people show up and they're paying $20 a ticket. That doesn't it's not hard to work out the math. What's your percentage of that? So you can start the conversation right there. You can get a couple of hundred people show up, 40 people show. How many people can you draw and at what price?
Right.
And that's basically. And if you figure out 70% of that, but then if it's a private party, it's a different deal. Again, what can you give me without hurting yourself? Now, if you've got an agent booking you, straight away your value has gone up because they have to be paid too.
Right.
And also they can be the bad guy.
Yeah.
If you have an agent and a manager, I always hear about how difficult someone's manager is to work with and how difficult someone's agent. And sometimes that's exactly what the artist wants because they want to look good and they want to be. They don't want to be. They don't want to look like the hard-nosed business guru, on the phone. You have somebody else dealing with that. So it's much better to have someone else deal with it if you're in a position to do that. But if you're not yet and you haven't got the interest of agents or managers or you haven't formed those relationships yet, you've got to be hard and you've got to negotiate for yourself. But you can start with how many people do you think you can get? And that is going to be determined on how well it's promoted. What are you going to do to promote it? Where are you going to get your people there? Well, if it's a town you've never played, then how many people do you know? With the internet, how many people have seen your YouTube video? How many people, where are your fans? Do you have a mailing list for each town? Always good to get mailing lists. So if you've played a town a couple of times, you know what you worked for the last time. If it's the first time, you just have to negotiate. What are they going to do to promote it? How many people do they think they can get at what ticket price? They know the market. So that's really where it is. So you do the math. If you can draw 100 people at $20, that's a couple of grand. You're going to get 70% of that. That's $1,400. You could, if somebody says, "I'd rather pay a flat fee," that's one thing. If you're working on a percentage. The other problem with working on a percentage is there is now no incentive for the person to promote because they don't stand to lose anything.
Yeah.
They don't stand to make as much, and so you got to weigh that up. So but it's a starting point. Everyone does business their own way. I've managed to make a living and survive doing it my way. I may have made all kinds of mistakes on the way up, but I'm having fun, and I've got to the point where I now have an agent that I'm working with. So you got to throw mud at the wall and see what sticks. Is that the right phrase to use in this situation?
Well, I mean, I feel like that's a perfect place to end it, actually, right there.
Right.
Maybe
everyone does have their own path.
Yeah.
Unless you're a pop star signed with a label, they have their path cut out for you, and then you just do what they tell you.
Right.
That's a different deal. But if you're a fingerstyle guitar player, you've got all the work out there. The first thing you do is learn how to play the guitar, and then you got to start learning all the other. It's about making relationships, forging relationships. As I said, I've never had anything but good experiences with promoters, because generally the promoters that want to promote this kind of stuff are listening to it because they're fans of the music and they're in it for the right reasons. So that's the way I see it.
Cool. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, Cody.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.